Thanks for coming to join us today on Discover Fort Smith podcast. Can you just tell us who you are, what you do, all that good stuff?
Hey guys, my name is Rachel Cannon. I'm the executive chef and director of operations of Stonehouse. We are a higher end steak and chop house located out in Chaffee Crossing.
Cool.
So how long have you been working there?
I've been there for almost 2 years now.
Cool.
Where'd you come from?
That is a loaded question.
Please tell me. Tell us.
We want your
So my
entire
mom and
life
dad
story.
met, and- no, I'm kidding.
Not
Tell
that
us-
far back.
tell us
A little
everything.
bit more forward than that.
So I grew up here. I was born and raised here. And then I went off once I graduated high school. And I was a little all over, which I'm sure we can get into that a little bit more later. But what got me back home to Fort Smith is Hardscrabble Country Club, actually. Got brought back here for that to kind of help change some things over there. Turned out, after a short-lived, it just wasn't my vibe.
What'd you do there?
I was the executive chef there.
Okay.
But it wasn't for me. I love the club and the people. It just wasn't my thing. I needed something that was, I guess, more rewarding in a way of reaching for that more fine dining. So a rep of mine was like, hey, I got somebody I want you to talk to. And sure enough, it was just kind of a match made in heaven. So
Cool.
I've been there for about almost 2 years now.
Nice. So your role as executive chef, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Because I know we kind of discussed a little bit before this what that looks like, and it wasn't at all what I expected.
Yeah,
Not
I think
at
it's
all.
a lot different than what most people think. Like I kind of mentioned, in a smaller kind of town and community like this, I think most of your high-end restaurants that you're going to do have working chefs, where you're actually seeing them work the line a couple of nights a week, especially on the weekends when it's busy. But if you look at the larger scale of what it means to be a chef, there's a brigade system and there's all these different levels of what it is. But most of the time, the executive chef is really focused on menu planning and development and, watching costs. That's a lot of things that people don't think about. Whenever you think about chef, you're like, oh, you're just playing with food, but you're working with a lot of numbers. You're controlling all these things. When it comes to labor, when it comes to the dish, that's where you come, how you figure out your menu pricing, all of these things. A lot of that is your day-to-day focus.
What's your favorite dish that you've come up with?
Well, I know this.
Do you really?
I do.
How do you know?
Because I know.
Okay, let's hear it.
The Firecracker Cauliflower.
It's one of my
And she
favorite
created
things.
it.
I love it. It was kind of one of those things that I created off of kind of a fancy version riff off of like a buffalo cauliflower, if you will. So I do like a tempura fried cauliflower, kind of like whenever you do Japanese style tempura battered vegetables. And then we do a gochujang aioli sauce on it, which is a fermented Korean red pepper paste. So you get a little bit of heat there. And then I love sesame, so add a little bit of that in. It's kind of a little Asian flair, if you will, on a fried cauliflower.
Did you bring some for us? No, I'm sorry.
I didn't. I did almost bring cocktails
Because
though.
you're
I was like
that
talking
would've
food and it
that
goes
would've
hand in hand
been
with cocktails.
There you go.
But it's funny because majority of my background and my love for food is all Italian, really. So
wow.
going kind of more of this kind of Asian route was kind of a surprise to myself even. But it's one of those things that every time we make an order, I'm like, make sure you drop 1 or 2 extra pieces. I just need a quality control of that one.
Exactly.
Every time.
So, what got you into creating dishes?
I think since I was a kid, I've always been very creative and I was very hands-on. I like to know how things work. Like I would take things apart and put them back together. I always just wanted to know how it works. So I think constantly being involved, and then I've always had a passion for art. And I kind of think those all just mend together. And once I kind of learned, the basics of, an onion goes with this, and, red wine pairs with this. I think I kind of just started throwing stuff together and just seeing what worked and what didn't work. And there's a lot that doesn't work. You find those things out. Sometimes you're not excited about it, but sometimes you make a mistake and then you've created something else and you're like, oh, wow, this works. You weren't even trying to do that from the beginning.
Yeah. Do you cook a lot at home?
I do actually, when I'm home, which is, few and far between, but I'm typically home every Sunday. So I normally will make like a Sunday dinner, like kind of, like the Italians are always like, oh, a big Italian Sunday dinner.
Yeah.
And I tend to go that direction with things, but
Nice.
Mhm.
That's really cool. And so you're an executive chef.
Mhm.
Have you been this in other places?
I have.
So where?
Where have you been?
Tell us where.
A lot. So I was executive chef at Stonehouse currently. Like I mentioned previously, Hardscrabble. Prior to that, I was up north in Minnesota. And I was helping kind of remold and reconfigure a food chain up there that's localized. They have multiple different concepts from bar food to fine dining as well. I also worked on a project up there for a nursing home to revamp what their culinary food was for their residents. And I actually learned a lot about nutrition, because a lot of times you're going to make something, you're not thinking about the calories in it. You're like, yeah, just throw an extra stick of butter in that, or so you're not thinking about the health factor.
solution to
Right.
most
Yeah.
things.
You're like, some sugar, that works. But that was a really cool, the really cool aspect for me of a learning scale. I was like, wow, okay, now I have to really learn the scientific behind foods and things like that. So that was a really neat kind of concept and thing for me to work on and help get to do. It was kind of a consulting thing that was really neat. Prior to that, I was in Delray Beach, Florida. So about 45 minutes north of Miami. Prior to that, I was in Philadelphia. I worked for Steven Starr Restaurant Group. He's got a lot of fine dining stuff all over Philly, New York, Paris, London. And then prior to that, I was in Nashville for 10 years with about a 6-month gap in there. I went over to Orvieto, Italy, and worked for a James Beard Award chef and kind of studied and trained under him at his restaurant. And then I was also I went to college in Scottsdale, Arizona. So
that's awesome.
Golly, you've been literally Minnesota and then Florida. I'm like, wow, that must have been a shock.
That was the hardest move, actually. I
Yeah.
went from there to there. It was one in the country to the other. And I went from living on a beach to living on an iced over lake. It's
Yeah.
Man, so
totally different experiences.
So yeah, you've got to experience all these different places, probably a lot of different dishes, different styles. How has that been like incorporated into what you're doing?
I think I've taken a little bit from each place, and kind of brought these things together. And I think that's one thing that makes my food very unique is I've been fortunate enough to get education, and I just, for the longest time, I told myself, I was like, I'm going to be a sponge and just soak up as much as I can. And I did that. And I think that's helped me succeed a lot in my career, because I don't feel that there's really any cuisine I can't at least attempt.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say I make the best Indian food by any means, but I can make a pretty decent, chicken tikka masala. There's stuff like that I can dabble in a little bit here and there. And so I think that's been the best part of this,
Yeah.
So how long have you been in Fort Smith?
I've been back now for just over 2 years.
Oh, okay.
August was 2 years. So
Okay, cool. And after having experienced all these different places with their own like unique cultures and their own, benefits, what about Fort Smith? I mean, this is a very different place from Philadelphia or Miami or
100%.
All these places that you mentioned. So, like, what is it like being an executive chef here compared to all those other places?
I'll tell you one of the things that at first when I got back, I thought was really kind of a hindrance in my career was not being able to source and find unique ingredients that were readily available. But at the same time, that kind of pushed me back to my fundamentals and was like, okay, let's go back to basic ingredients.
Yeah.
And now how do I make those basic ingredients shine and get more creative? So
like
in a way, it kind of like pushed me to kind of become more creative with, the basic things. Because at first, I got back and one of the things I asked for was like a radish. I asked there's like ninja radishes and black radishes, and all of my reps were like, first of all, I've never even heard of that. Second, let me do some research and see if I can find it. I was like, okay. And they did. And they're like, we found it, but it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to get here. I'm like, it's a radish. What is going on? Or certain lettuces or just simple things like that. So I've really been like, okay, let's go back to the basics and get creative. And so it's kind of pushed me in a way to do new things.
So this may be just like a totally dumb question, but
We're all about dumb questions.
very curious. Like, what makes a restaurant fine dining? I mean,
I think this question is interesting because I think it kind of runs parallel with like the foodie thing.
yeah.
And I honestly can't stand the term because I'm like, what is a foodie? Like, do you just like food? And it's like, well, I like food. But what is
Are we
that?
all
What
foodies?
is It's like, how many people out there do you know that don't like food?
Yeah.
So is everybody a food? Like, what does that really mean? And I think the perception of fine dining, I think has been labeled and put on things going back, 50, 75 years in the food industry of just like, oh, okay, it's white tablecloths and it's fancy glassware and it's, your staff is dressed up appropriately, in tux whenever you're greeted, things like that. And so I think that term has kind of gotten loose over several years. And actually we're in the process of rebranding right now because we've kind of wanted to go away from that. And it's, I mentioned to you guys earlier, it's like expectation is the leading cause of disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, oh, well, you're fine dining. It's supposed to be this and this. And so they have these high expectations. So we're actually kind of in the process of talking and trying to kind of rebrand what we are. And we've started like throwing around the word of like, we're vibe dining. Like it's fun. We want it to be a good vibe.
Nice.
We
We're
want it to be
vibe dining.
we want it to be a good
That's cool.
vibe.
I wanna
You
vibe
have
dine.
great classic cocktails, you have new craft cocktails, you have very innovative food dishes, that are they nicer sure than driving to McDonald's and getting a burger? Yes, absolutely. Are we going to ever be a Michelin star restaurant? Probably not.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, where do we find that happy medium there? We're focused on what the ingredients are, the process of preparing foods. It's not our chicken stock, for instance, even takes 2 days to make, and most things are just like go, go, go. And a lot of people, I think, have started to take shortcuts, and I think it's hurting people. So, and like it goes back to that expectation thing. And so, I don't know. I think that fine dining is. I think it's just everybody having this super high expectation of everything is perfect and someone's crumbing the table and all these things.
It's intimidating to me, honestly, a little bit. Like I'm thinking when I think fine dining, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be expensive. Like,
and that's the other thing. It immediately goes to dollar signs. And one of the biggest things actually we did 2 months ago, because we did start getting pretty pricey. But one of the things we recognized, that we're in a bad place right now. Like, financially, our economy is it's not great. It's not great for anybody. You've seen dollar prices at the grocery store, even. It's just like, golly. So obviously, you see those prices go up. Our prices are going up just the same.
Right.
Plus, we're paying a lot of people to cook all these things. So we recognized it was like, hey, we know that people are struggling and not everybody can afford to come out and spend, almost $50 on a steak. And so we adjusted our menu and we threw some kind of more budget-friendly items on there for people because we want to be approachable to everybody in our community.
Yeah. And I think
that.
like a big part of it is the experience too, right?
Of course.
You go into Stonehouse and you see, this wood and, the decor, like the lush leather kind of and the lighting and everything. And it's just like an ambiance. I loved the vibe dining.
Yeah.
See, it's a vibe.
Like
It is a vibe.
it made me want to go vibe dining.
And the cocktails are amazing.
Oh yeah, the cocktails. Yeah.
So
Our
they're
bar
next-
manager does a great job of
They're next
crafting
level.
those.
Next level.
Yeah.
He says they're next level.
I knew I should have brought some.
So
Next time.
missed opportunity.
Yeah.
So what makes a big part of this podcast is helping people discover things that are in Fort Smith maybe they haven't looked into before. What makes Stonehouse unique as far as a dining experience of Fort Smith?
I think the history, and I think overall in this town in general, I think that's kind of what makes Fort Smith a staple is the history that is here. I think there's a lot of cool, unique history here, and I think that's the same with Stonehouse. It was originally Manus Schoolhouse. I don't quote me on the dates, but I think late 30s. And what was really neat about that is that the German soldiers were also brought over to help like build on that back like porch area and all the stonework that's done. And then there's also this old fire pit that they built out there to actually like be able to use and cook.
So a lot of that's original.
It's totally original.
Oh,
wow.
It's
That is
historical,
cool.
so some of it can't be touched. Even our most recent porch, we enclosed that porch area in the back, which is beautiful. But all of that had to go through the city and be voted on because it was a historical site. So all that rock and that stone that we were building up on had to be approved.
Right.
The windows, we can't move or change those out because they're historical. So I think something like that is really unique and creates a cool vibe. Plus, I just kind of love history. So
Yeah. Well, cool. Okay, so since you've been here for 2 years, your family's here, right? But
part of my family's still here.
Okay. When you've got people that come in to visit, like friends and stuff, where do you typically like to take them? I mean, from a visitor perspective, so what are some places in the city that people just have to see that are so Fort Smith? Like it would be a shame to come and not visit these places.
Going to eat, Rolando's, honestly, is my favorite restaurant. And I love Rolando's.
So
it tastes fresh. It's got
it's delicious.
Yeah.
I
plus
give them huge compliments. I love it.
Yeah.
No matter like what location they've moved to, I think they've always been consistent, and it's been one of my favorites since I was young. And so every time somebody comes in town, I'm like, we're going to eat here. That's one of them. And then, like I mentioned, I do enjoy history. So just even going down and walking around, where the hanging judge and all that stuff, I think it's a little cruel, but it's also crazy to see. I think at the same time, it kind of humbles you of how far we've come.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because I think people, you just forget. You get in your day-to-day life and you forget those things. But so that's something I love what they've done with the bakery district. I think that's really neat. My high school reunion was actually over here, so it was kind of cool. And I love golf, so if it's a golfer that I have to come play visit, then I'm like, hey, we're going out here.
Yeah.
Where do you go?
For golf.
Hard scrabble for most of the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll typically, it's really just hanging around with a lot of friends. I don't go out often. If it is, it's maybe go to 906 for a cocktail or something. But
So I'm interested in how you or when you decided this is it. I want to be a chef. This is what I want to do with my life.
yeah, I got there in a very roundabout way.
Okay.
It wasn't my goal by any means. I've mentioned golf, and that was always my number one passion. I went to college on a golf scholarship out in Arizona.
Oh, cool.
And then I got into a really bad car wreck and I messed up my wrist. And my parents had actually moved up to Northwest Arkansas by that time. And so I came back home for a little bit and they were just like, we don't feel like you need to go back out there, blah, blah, blah. So I stayed home and a bunch of my friends were going to school at the U of A. Well, I just naturally kind of fell into hanging out, partying with my friends like I was in college, but I wasn't going to school.
You had all the benefits. But you didn't have
I had all of it, except I didn't have to do the work.
Yeah, you didn't have to do the work.
Well, my parents got tired of that.
Yeah.
They finally were like, here's the thing. You're either going back to school or you're getting a job.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was one of those things where I just couldn't figure it out. When I first went to college, my major was forensic science. And then I decided to go back. I was like, okay, I'll take some classes. And I went for sports medicine. And I still was just like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I couldn't pinpoint what it was that I was supposed to do, what I was called to do. And a friend of mine worked at a pizzeria and she was like, we're hiring for a hostess. Why don't you come up here? And I was just like, no, restaurant. Like, I don't know what it was. I enjoyed cooking. Like, I learned that from my grandmother and my mom. I was passionate about it with them. I just did not want to be in a restaurant. It's the last place I wanted to be. And I just did because I was like, all right, this is going to get my parents off my back, And so I started there and I was a hostess. And then I started serving bartending. And then from there, I ended up being the general manager of the place. And my office was kind of located in the kitchen. And whenever they would get busy, I would just hop on the line and start helping them make food. And then I was addicted.
Yeah.
And because this industry is honestly, it's a really weird one. It's so many people try to get out and they almost always come back. So I was cooking all the time. I enjoyed it. And I finally was just like, what am I doing? Like, I like this. It's fun. And so I went to culinary school in Nashville and just continued to work my way up and work for different companies. And now I'm the chef.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was the last thing I absolutely wanted to do.
So you have your parents to thank. Is that what you're saying?
That and my friend Tracy, for sure. Because she was the one that was like, just come on. But yeah.
Like,
So
what a cool story.
I've actually started writing a book recently on kind of like the story of, I guess a memoir in a way, plus recipes and kind of art. Because I mentioned like I always love art, and like I said, I think they go hand in hand. So
That's great.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a cool story. I did want to ask a question about like the location of Stonehouse. So you're out over there at Chaffee.
Mhm.
And so when visitors come in, what do you recommend that they do around? Like if they want to have an experience and like come to Stonehouse as the culmination of their day,
Mhm.
right? Like what could they do over there?
well, I mean, depending on the time of the month, they do that really big farmers market that's
Oh,
over there,
yeah,
which
the
is really
food and
great.
medicine.
Yeah, that's a really cool little area that they have set up over there. The barracks are also over there now, which I think is neat too, because there's some little back to history. You can kind of walk around over there, and I think there's some little figures or little note things of like whenever Elvis was stationed here.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's cool.
His famous haircut.
Uh-huh.
over at
Yeah, the little
Chaffee.
barbershop
Yeah.
thing. And I think that's neat to walk around and see.
Yeah, and that
And there's
museum
that
of
little
history.
nature center as well over there. So it's really pretty. You can walk around over there. There's people out there fishing. There's a little hiking over there that you can do. Huge bike trail over there.
The Janet
Uh-huh.
Huckabee.
Yes,
Yeah, it is right
yeah.
over there.
It's great. Sometimes that's my little midday break. I just need a breather.
Oh, that's nice.
It's like a 2-minute,
Just hop
They've
over
got
there.
they've got
Little
like
drive.
kayaking, fishing. I
Mhm.
think they
They
even
have little
have fishing
trails.
poles and stuff for you
Mhm.
over there. It's pretty neat.
Yeah,
Janet Huckabee.
and they offer these like classes and stuff too. I think
Yeah.
I think so.
that's cool. I had
Well,
forgotten
there's a
the
couple of
proximity.
things over there. Portsmouth Brewery's out there, so you can go
Yeah.
try some local brews. There's a lot of good stuff out there to do. And it's just exploding, Dave and Jen, the owners of Stonehouse, I would say they took a big leap. They opened it in 2015 and
Oh,
there was
yeah.
nothing out
There
there.
was nothing.
Right.
Nothing out there. And they survived, even through COVID, and they pushed through. At that point, they just really, I don't even think they were really worried about, the business or making sure people were happy. They honestly kind of turned into like a meat market during
Mhm.
COVID. And because there were so many people that were having shortage of groceries and stuff like that. And they really kind of put together stuff and really tried to help out the community, which I think is really cool. And I think it speaks to a lot of volume about them as well.
Yeah. I lived here from 2011 to 2016, and then I moved away. I was in Fort Worth for a while. I was in Northwest Arkansas for a while. But every time I call my friends and say, hey, we're getting ready to come back for the weekend. We want to hang out. What do you want to do? They're like, you got to go out to Chaffee. It's changing so much. And there's this place called Stonehouse you need to check out. And, I remember that. And so it survived because of the name that kept,
Mhm.
spreading. The word of mouth was incredible for
Yeah.
Chaffee and for Stonehouse. So,
Yeah. And it's just blowing up out there now. So
And it really is. I mean, the development, there's Heritage Trace, like right down the street.
What's that?
It's the shopping center out
Oh, I
there,
haven't
like
seen
Olive Coffee. And
Oh, is that what that's called?
yeah.
I should know that, Unwind is
Yeah,
there.
Unwind is
Uh-huh.
there. They have
Yeah.
like some boutique shops,
Yeah.
and they have like I think they have a spa,
Las
and
Americas.
stuff. Yeah, Las
Yeah.
Americas.
Yeah.
It is exploding.
Yeah.
It's totally exploding over there. And the Chaffee Museum of History is up and coming, like
Yeah.
getting off the ground over there, and it's supposed to be really cool too.
I think in the next several years, it's going to be the new kind of hotspot area of Fort Smith.
Especially with all that housing stuff that they're building.
Tons of housing development
Oh,
going
yeah.
on.
Things are kind of spreading in that direction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
So what are you excited for in the future? I guess not just Chaffee, but Stonehouse also. What's the future hold? What are you excited about?
Stonehouse, I would say what I'm looking towards for the future is just continuing to, evolve it, get more people to know about us, know who we are, know what we care about, what it is that we're trying to do. I think going back to that whole, what is fine dining, I really want to focus on getting people to know that we are approachable for everybody in our community. Focusing on that and increasing our catering business to try to, be able to help people more with their events and things like that. There's been talks in long run of, if we're continuing to be successful, maybe possibly opening up another operation, same concept, different concept, either here, different city, things like that. So I would love to just continue to see it grow. For Stonehouse, I would say. Excited for the future for myself. I am about finished with applying for a new Food Network show. So hopefully that goes through. We'll see.
Cool.
So
Can you tell us what show?
Is there? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on it yet, so I can speak of whatever. Hopefully I get on it. I don't know. But I just started filling out the application process for the Next Level Chef. It's a Gordon Ramsay one where they're like the 3-tier different types of kitchen.
Cool.
Oh, I hope you get on. That's
I think it would be awesome. It would be cool.
When do you hear? When are you
I
supposed
don't
to
know.
hear?
Sometimes it takes them a while.
Yeah.
Chopped reached out to me whenever, I don't know, it was probably 6 months ago, but I couldn't do anything because I was still locked in a contract from Guy's Grocery Game. So I couldn't, they lock you in a contract afterwards. So
wait, Guy's Grocery Game?
Uh-huh.
What's this?
Guy's Grocery Game?
Yeah, I don't think I know this.
You know who Guy Fieri is?
Yeah.
One of his competition shows is where you're like running around the grocery store and you have to create a meal and all that.
So you were on that show?
I won it.
You didn't know?
I had no idea.
Yeah, I've been on
Mind
that.
blown.
I've been on that, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and Man vs. Food.
Okay, well.
We are like regular. We're sitting here
I'm
as a
like,
regular
I'm
celebrity
starting to
here.
sweat here a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, how cool.
So now I'm gonna try for that one and see what happens. But
that's awesome.
it would be fun.
Yeah.
Man, that is, I think what's really interesting to me is I hear things like that, and my response has always been, wow, even for Fort Smith. But I think now it's becoming more commonplace, which is cool. Now, of course, for Fort Smith, you know what I mean? Of course, somebody from Fort Smith's doing these cool things because that's what people from Fort Smith do.
Yeah.
So it's pretty neat seeing that transition.
And I think I think you're very right on that. I think that's something that doing podcasts, doing things like this is to really like help open up other people's minds. I think there's some things that are still so like closed mind, small town mind, I guess, if you will. And they kind of forget that like it's okay to dream big. It's okay to be successful. I mean, there's been a lot of people that have come out of here that have done amazing things.
Yeah.
And, going back, Rossi Morelli, I don't know if you guys remember him, but I mean, he grew up here. He played for Arkansas Razorbacks. Then he was on some, I think it was, I want to say Love Island. That's all it. It's close though. It's close to that. It's like, yes, that's it. That's it. Yeah. He was on that, and then he ended up going to do some other show, and then became like this producer. Now he has like his own production company and is like out in California. Like he's extremely successful. Brett Good, he was my neighbor. I still claim that I taught him how to play football. So, but he played for Arkansas and then he played for Green Bay Packers. Like, there's tons of success stories out of this smaller town, and I think people just forget to have this big open mind because they're small.
Yeah. And like, you're from here, right? Born and raised. And so
I did leave for 20 years, but born and raised.
But you came back.
But I came back.
Here we are.
Yeah.
But what do you think is special about Fort Smith? Like,
I mean, to me, it's just this nostalgia feeling, it's home. There's just so many childhood memories here, so many different things. So I feel like that's kind of hard to answer because what's special to me is probably completely different, but what's special to either one of you. So I think that's kind of really hard question to answer.
Yeah. Okay, so you've lived in all these different places. Yeah. You've had a bunch of success. You've been on shows. Like you're writing a book now. You are an executive chef. It's a great restaurant. Why, after all of these experiences in other places, move back to Fort Smith?
I think that's a very simple answer, and I think it's a very complicated answer. But I'd say the simple answer is family, friends and family. But at the same time, out there in this bigger world, like we talked, like this is a smaller town. Out there in that, I'm a small fish in a big pond. Here, I have a lot of backing. I have a lot of support. My dad was very successful here as well as a news anchor. And so I have a lot of that support. And it's kind of like now I've become a big fish in a small pond. And with a lot of the things that I want to do, there's also, even in back of my mind, there's also this nonprofit foundation I want to start to help other chefs and all these things. In 2 weeks, I leave to go to Guatemala to go help and teach these girls how to cook at this. It's called Girls Education Matters program. That's like with the monastery. So also like being back here, being the bigger fish in a small pond is giving me more opportunities professionally to be able to give back and help and have that support behind me.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about Fort Smith is really, if you have a dream, you can achieve it here. If you work hard enough, if you start making connections with people, you can make those things happen.
There's a lot of connections to be made.
It's harder for that to happen, I think.
I agree.
Oh, for sure.
I agree.
Like I just think about my job too, and I think in Austin it would have been really difficult. I would have had to know a lot of the right people and run in certain circles and things to be able to do what I do here. And I think it's a great place to get involved.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you're interested in building something, and if you're interested in growing something, it's a great place to be.
100%. I agree.
And it's just cool to be a part of all of that.
I want us to get a little more culture in our restaurant scene here, and I'll be good.
Yeah. How do you think?
I think we will. Go ahead. What's your question?
Well, I was just going to say, like, how can we make that happen?
It's hard, honestly, I don't know if it's necessarily about not having the culture, but having, I guess, more of that consistency of good products and sourcing products, kind of like where I said, it's like, hey, it was hard for me to get simple radishes. Those things make a difference. The level of, cooks and things like that, their education and experience, that makes a difference. And I think it's just going to take a couple of really good people to, kind of migrate here and be like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how it's done. Like, there's no altering this, and just really stay on people and grow them. And then that's just got to continue to happen. People have to keep teaching and want to teach each other and not look at going into a place as just going to collect a paycheck. And that is one of the things that I focus on the most with all of my staff. I'm like, if you're not looking forward to coming to work, then I don't want you to be here, because it's not the right fit for you. Every person, before I hire them, we do what's called a stage in the restaurant world.
That's a French word.
It is. But so basically it's a working interview, and I always tell them, I'm like, come in and hang out with us for a couple hours. See if it's a good fit for you, not just us. Like, you're interviewing us too. You got to want to be here. You got to want to be a part of this. And I think that culture is so just beat into people in these larger metropolitan cities of, the culinary world, because out there it's drop of a hat. You can turn around and open your back door in the alley and you have another 5-star cook to just bring in, And here the competition is tough because you don't have a big pool to grab from.
I'm curious with the foreign military sales pilot training position that's coming in, what that will do. Yeah.
I think we're gonna see a big push to start just overall, not just restaurants, but I think even more activities, of things to do, things for adults to do, things for kids to do. Maybe I know they're working on like the Fort Kids Museum, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
But even just, I don't know, not necessarily activities that are just always revolved around alcohol. I feel like that's a big part. It's like, if you want to go out and do something, it's like you kind of have the option to go to a bar or, so hopefully there's more adult activities, that are fun. I think that we'll see people will start building and growing.
Yeah.
Like, the axe thing or whatever, those little things like that.
Like the axe throwing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, I really appreciate you coming and
Absolutely.
talking with
Thank
us
you
today.
so
It was
much.
really cool to learn the history of Stonehouse and
And to hear
even
your story.
yeah, your story.
Thank
Cool.
you.
And to learn like what it actually means to be a chef.
Yeah.
You know? And so thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It was great to be with you guys today. Thank you so much.
Thanks.